Welcome back to ITB Berlin NOW 2021. It's a pleasure to have you back. So thanks again for joining us this afternoon, Central European time. A good afternoon also to our colleagues in Africa. Good evening to our colleagues in Asia and down under. And a very early morning to North America and South America. Thanks for joining us for ITB Berlin. We do miss you here in Berlin and we hope to see you soon. Nevertheless, we created this digital platform together and to get inspired from each other together. With different topics. So we started into our day, the first day of ITB Berlin NOW 2021 at the TTA Forum, Technology Tours Activities. We're going to head into a wrap-up later in a few moments, but I just wanted to give you a glimpse what we had. So we also focused on these new, young, fresh ideas at Startup Now. And of course now we are in the middle of the responsible tourism track. We already discussed about very visionary, female, strong tourism leaders building up the tourism sector, also of course following along the Sustainable Development Goals. And we had several awards going on, so a lot of female voices for important topics. Nevertheless, we're going to continue at the responsible tourism track. Thanks again for watching and of course for joining the discussions in Slido, but also of course on the digital platform and in the cafes. Nevertheless, stay tuned. Now it's coming up another session with Rika, Jean-Francois. So Rika again, who's with you now?
So we are very happy to welcome you to our next panel. It will be the last one for today, but a very important one because it's close to my heart. It's Indigenous Tourism and Sustainability, sustainable, authentic Indigenous experiences in times of crisis. So I want to introduce you to our panelists. First of all, we have Darren Capewell from Australia, from Western Australia. He's a former Australian rules football player, and he started his own incoming touring business in 2004. And he's sharing the history of his ancestors and the respect for nature with visitors ever since. So his business is called Wula, Gura, Nyinda Eco-Cultural Adventures. Hello, Darren. Second is Beverley O'Neill. She's the founder and owner of a marketing consulting firm called DesigningNations, but also founder of the Aboriginal Tourism Association of British Columbia in 1997. She has been actively working and supporting Indigenous communities since many years. And she's also a marathon runner and she's a comedian. And she's a citizen of Gopinath Nation, a member of Calm First Nation. I hope I pronounced it quite well. Hello, Beverley. Then Ben Sherman. He's already a legend. Everybody knows him. He's the elected chairman of WINTA, the World Indigenous Tourism Alliance. And yeah, he was one of the founders of WINTA, actually. And he also mastered a degree in business management, but he has been working ever since for Indigenous communities. He's also founder of the Native Tourism Alliance, the first people found, American Indian Alaska Tourism Association. So he's really a nation leader in American Indian tourism development. So we are very happy to have him here. Hello, Ben. And last not least, it's Gopinath Parayil, who is the president and founder of the BlueYonder, an award-winning incoming company in Kerala in South India. He's also a partner, responsible tourism partner of ITB since many years. And Gopinath has studied disaster management, had been living in the UK for some time as a consultant. But out of his passion for the dying river of his home region, he founded the Nila Foundation, that's the name of the river, and the BlueYonder in 2003 already. And ever since, he has kind of kicked off the responsible tourism movement. And I think he has influenced all of us very positively. Hello, Gopi. So now we will start our session with Darren Capewell, as our conversation had to be pre-recorded because of the big time difference. So he cannot join the discussion, but I asked him some questions before, so it will be very interesting to listen to him. He's from Western Australia, as I said, from Shark Bay, And now we should see the little video.
My name is Capes. I'm from my company called Wula, Gura, Nyinda Eco-Cultural Adventures. And we are based in a place that we call Gura, also known as the Shark Bay World Heritage Area in Western Australia. My job through tourism is to introduce our guests to our backyard. We want to show people this country from the inside, not from the outside. Because whilst this place looks beautiful and spectacular, in our Aboriginal culture we say it's not what nature looks like, it's actually what nature feels like. This is the place where the desert meets the ocean, and we want you guys to come and join us so you can feel the energy of Gura, just like we do.
So that was a very interesting video, and I think it really explained everything already you're doing. So I'm very happy to talk today to Darren Capewell. So Capes, it's wonderful that you're here with us from down under, as we say. You're in the most western part of Australia, and you had been living in the big city, I heard, for a long time, and then 20 years ago, or is it more, you decided to go back to country and to do your own business. And you have been doing this ever since very successfully. So I just wanted to ask you, why do you think that it's important, especially also for Indigenous Australians, to get involved, to have a say in tourism? And if so, why is it?
Very good, very good. Yes, I did live in Perth for a couple of years, not a long time. When my son was born, he's now 22. When he was born, I made a conscious decision that I'd want to bring him back home where I grew up so he can, grow up here in Gura, in Shark Bay. So I came back home in 2000, and like most of us Aboriginal people from this area, it's not a matter of if we come back, it's just a matter of when we come back. And that's because this is our spiritual homeland, and it sustains us spiritually, culturally, emotionally, physically, mentally. And I started work in my own business. I've never been involved in business. I'm very passionate about my Aboriginal culture and very passionate about the environment. In regard to what people refer to as tourism, my job isn't tourism. My job is looking after Shark Bay or Gura, our culture, language, and the environment. Tourism is a vehicle that allows me to be on my country for me to be able to do that. So tourism is a vehicle that allows me to be able to be on country and to look after country pretty much. My business is called Wula, Gura, Nyinda. In our local Aboriginal language, it means come this way you. I wanted to do something to introduce people to country through culture, and culture, I would say.
Would you even say that tourism is a tool to better preserve and respect nature and to original culture? Do you see tourism as a tool for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly from an Aboriginal cultural perspective. As you know, tourism's a big industry. So it depends on what part of tourism. But from my own experience and Aboriginal people, we don't go in. Tourism it's our lifestyle. So tourism is a word that describes what we do, being on country, being involved in nature, and it allows us to be able to do that on our home country, to be able to do that. And, we can look after country because we're out on country, looking after cultural sites. keeping our languages alive. So yes, absolutely.
I mean, tourism had sometimes also been a problem. I know that it is only in 2019 that Uluru finally, that it was forbidden to climb Uluru. So I think there had been a lot of conflict regarding tourism also, and a lot of people, I'm sure, didn't want to have tourists because of that, you know, because around this the holy, the Saint Mountain, there had been like tourism resorts and so on, and that all had been removed. So now I think there is a different understanding about tourism, and I think it's very important that your people also support it, that it can be done the right way. So do you think you are in a way a role model for other indigenous people in your country to start their own business and to be to be ready to have a say and to get engaged rather than giving it to other people?
Just going right back at the start. So on one hand, you've got tourism. On the other hand, you've got cultural protocol. Tourism comes second to cultural protocol. And people say, and they said, oh, you should do this here. It'll be a great experience. But if it conflicts with our cultural principle and cultural philosophy, then it won't work. So one of the things we try and explain, we have cultural protocols, things that we can do, things that we can say, things that we can't say, places we can't visit, you know. So our job is to educate people through cultural awareness, and tourism helps us with that, to educate people about Aboriginal culture in Australia, first and foremost, and the relationship that we have to country. And some people use tourism as a vehicle, like myself, use tourism as a vehicle to be able to do that. And in regard to Uluru, I can't speak for that country because I don't have connection to that area. However, it's been a long time. I know a lot of people from that way, and for a long time, it doesn't make them feel good when, you know, people are not respecting a very significant cultural site. And
how do you make sure that they follow the right path?
Thank you, Rika. As is customary, I would first like to acknowledge and pay tribute to the descendants of the ancient indigenous tribes who roam the forest, mountains, and waterways of what we call Germany today.
Thank you.
I will say that the inglorious history of conquest that you referred to includes murder, slavery, displacement, and genocide. The effects of these assaults on our indigenous people continues to this day as we work to rebuild our communities, our cultures, economies, and our self-sufficiency. So WINTA is using the vehicle of tourism to help regain the well-being of indigenous populations. However, we face many barriers to our full participation in the tourism industry. Issues of exclusion and racism still exist in many locations around the world. So we seek to overcome those issues by demonstrating the benefits of adopting good practices by the travel and tourism industry. We encourage indigenous communities and entrepreneurs to create tour businesses that are attractive and competitive and authentic. We are working with United Nations World Travel Organization to develop projects that would help the empowerment of women through leadership, business skills, development, and marketing. Published good practices and indigenous rights guides exist throughout the world for all participants in the industry, intended for use by governments, tour operators, tour destinations, travel agencies, academia. Major world organizations such as the United Nations, the Organization of American States, the UN World Tourism Organization, others each have their own versions of these standards. And yes, we have some instances of non-authentic representations of our indigenous cultural expressions. These are created by non-indigenous tour business operators who lack knowledge of authentic practices and instead present to the public what they think the public wants. By eliminating the non-authentic and fake presentations, we benefit both the traveling public and indigenous communities. Every day, we battle the problem of non-indigenous copying of authentic handmade products. Indigenous women are cheated of fair trade and income for their art and handiwork by mass-produced and cheaper fake products. Rika?
Yeah, Ben, I think this is a very important aspect that you mentioned, because as this is happening all over the world, and I know also in Australia, it's a big, big issue. There are so many complaints about it, but maybe we should really pick that up and organize an extra session next year about that, because that really demands to be talked about. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the crisis, the current crisis we are in, unfortunately, the pandemic. All tourism businesses have been affected, and this includes, of course, indigenous tourism businesses as well. When I talked to Capes before, I didn't have the time to dive deeper, unfortunately, and to learn how he actually managed to get through the crisis. But I want to ask you, so especially indigenous people, if I may say so, have shown resilience for centuries. I mean, there was no other choice, actually. And so it has become part of the heritage. And I remember Beverley just told me once, she said, there's a long line of survivors. Yeah, so resilience. I want to ask Gopi, because Gopi has studied crisis management. So, and he has been working with the communities living at this River Nila we were talking about since many years. So Gopi, would you say, is that right? Is traditional wisdom and knowledge sometimes nearly forgotten and buried due to colonial past and paternalism? To stay resilient, indigenous people would need to return to their values? Gopi?
Well, Rika, it's actually very easy to put everything on the colonial powers. My experience is also that equal amount or probably even more damages has been done by our own people post-independence in a country like India. Like if you just look at the indigenous communities who were thrown out of the forests in the name of preserving the forest resources, we got it all wrong. So yes, so colonial powers had done a lot of damages, but our own people, soon after independence, we have done even more damages. Yeah, but when you look at that, if you talk about the indigenous knowledge of the communities, this is again very tricky scenario. Like it's always easy to put people in a box and expect them to live in certain way, because there's a lot of exotism in seeing an indigenous community living in the traditional way. But how can you actually push somebody in the name of exotism, in the name of being authentic, at the compromise of quality of life? So this is always a debate. And as a tour operator, I actually do not engage. My company, the BlueYonder, never engages in a situation where we will not showcase an indigenous community as a tourism product. Never. Unless and otherwise the indigenous community has the power, has the agency to take care of that part. My job is only to be a facilitator, because the decision making has to come from the community, the knowledge sharing has to come from the community, because otherwise, as we see in many places, what happens is the indigenous community experiences will become exactly like as you see in a zoo. It's very disrespectful, and this is not something that as a responsible tourism operator, people like us should promote. Only when the community and you can together as the travel industry co-create the travel experiences, which is linked to the sustainable development of the area, that is where it would work.
Do you have an example for that, Gopi? I think it's very interesting what you're saying.
Well, we've been working on one project which has become one of the largest initiatives that we have ever got involved. This is not along the river Nila, but in another place, where there is this wild rice that came from the mountain, from the Western Ghats, came down in a flood in 14th century. It settled on the banks of the rivers in 3 districts of Kerala. And the beauty of this particular rice is that it can grow in saline water, and then it can grow up to 1.5 meter tall. So whenever the flood comes in, this is the only variety of rice that sustains. But unfortunately, since it's a very labor-intensive practice, so the cost is very high, and the farmers hardly get enough money to sustain the business or sustain the agricultural practices. So what we did is we partnered with the local cooperatives, with the local communities there, and then we started working with the hospitality tourism sector, where we took care of the basic minimum selling price of the rice. So there is a minimum guarantee of price that they get. And as part of this process, what we did is we started working with the community in such a way that all the traditional knowledge is actually enhanced and reapplied as life skills. So the boats and kayaks and canoes are all utilized and repurposed as conservation tools, as tourism tools, which brings in monies, extra source of income. These are not alternative source of income, extra sources, supplementary source of income for the community. And then we train these people in such a way that they can also become first responders. These are inherent qualities and skills that they already have. They had, and it only needed to be a little bit fine-tuned so that it meets the new world order, which is unfortunately all the natural disasters which are part of the climate crisis. So this 3 repurposing of the traditional knowledge actually ended up becoming such a powerful tool for us, especially in 2018 when we had the floods in Kerala. more than 4,800 people, we could relocate, we could rescue all of them using exactly the tools that we had with us without being dependent on anybody. That self-sufficiency was something that saved them. So basically what we say, is that if a community, especially the indigenous community, they are not resilient enough to overcome a crisis that is related to climate change, they will never be able to overcome the sort of natural disasters that follows that. So the focus is about putting together that knowledge of the indigenous community and then apply it in this modern crisis that we are all facing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Gopi. I think this is a very fascinating example of how forgotten knowledge it can be essential for effective resilience, and which can help everybody. So I think in general, science and research should really start to consult also indigenous knowledge or forgotten products like this rice, especially in the climate change discourse. Indigenous people's rights and knowledge systems are critical on a way to developing solutions to climate crisis, as you said, and achieving climate justice. So in 2015, I think in Canada, also there was the Indigenous Climate Action Group founded, right, Beverley? So I would like to come back to you. We don't have much time, but what do you think? It's time to foster Indigenous sovereignty. Indigenous communities have to take decisions to their own well-being for their land, but also for the whole planet. I mean, yeah, because climate change is happening and we urgently have to react. So can Indigenous expertise be a driver of solution, especially to climate change? Do you agree?
Yes, I do. And I just want to build on what Gopi had to say there as well. And the theme here is about sustainability. Tourism is an act of sovereignty, is an act of Indigenous people regaining leadership and their own self-determination. So I think that's a very important part. When you asked about how do we make these sustainable, I think you have to accept that tourism is a part of a society. It's a part of our economies. It's a part of who we are. When we're talking about how do we stay sustainable, well, let's use tourism as a means for stewardship. And the Great Bear Rainforest Initiative, the agreement that 27 First Nations on the coast, starting at the northern tip of Vancouver Island, up the coast near Bella Bella, Klemtu, Hai, up to Haida Gwaii, 27 First Nations entered into an agreement with British Columbia for land stewardship. And tourism is a means for them to exercise their leadership of management of those resources, and it's also been a way for partnerships, so that when visitors go to that tourism region, they're able to go to an area where the First Nations are again in a leadership position, as they rightfully should be, in driving how that area is developed and how its resources are used and how people experience and enjoy the spirit there itself. So use tourism as a means to an end. It's an act of sovereignty. It can be stewardship. Through tourism, we can apply, I love the Ojibwe 7 grandfather teachings, which includes respect and courage and truth and honesty. I love that. But through tourism, we can use it as a means to create a sustainable environment and to restore and revive the most valued aspects of our culture and our values and our beliefs. Thank you,
Beverley. But if you look at the current situation, I mean, I think that's about 98% of these Indigenous tourism businesses depend on international incoming tourism. And I don't think there is enough domestic tourism to compensate it. So do you have any idea how that could be handled, the situation?
I'd like to add is I think that, having been a founder of Indigenous tourism, in British Columbia, I wanted to see it start because we were at the forefront of launching the modern day treaty making process. Tourism was a vehicle for us to share why we're in the process, but tourism as a friendly means of doing that. So I think we've missed the mark in terms of connecting with the domestic market. So look, I don't like COVID, but it gives us an opportunity to rejig. It's a great time to plan. It's a great time to rebuild. And for a lot of First Nations, our tourism experiences, we don't have all the eggs in one basket. The 98% visitors for some of the businesses, yes, that's true. But a lot of times the band-owned businesses, tourism is one aspect of their economic development. It's not all of it. And for the businesses where they've got 100% of their investment and 100% of their income is dependent on visitors, they are going to suffer, and a lot of them won't survive. But for a lot of the First Nations businesses, it hasn't been that, because it's not a job and it's not their sole source of income. It's a way of life, and that's what really makes a difference. It's a means to revival of who we are and a celebration of who we are, and a way for our elders to return to their role in our communities and our youth to get to know who they are for their own self-esteem.
Thank you, Beverley. I think that was very, very important, because if you make tourism a monoculture, then you will be too vulnerable once again. So that doesn't work at all. Ben, just what do you think about all this? And how can communities build resilience and effectively manage crisis? What are your thoughts?
Well,
We don't have much time left, but I want to hear that.
Indigenous societies have always shown the greatest resilience in the world. Our survival required resilience. However, in the face of these strange diseases, we have no protection, and so we suffer as others do in the world. However, keep in mind that Indigenous people live closer to nature, have always, and our people still use ancient knowledge and wisdom to continue this close relationship to Mother Earth. So my advice would be for the world to learn and practice Indigenous Earth wisdom, and also to pay our debts to the planet for the things that we have done to harm it.
Thank you, Ben. And Gopi, last not least, what would be your advice for communities working in tourism? Not only regarding the pandemic, but regarding any crisis.
As Beverley was mentioning, I would rephrase it in such a way that we can't put all eggs in one basket. And tourism cannot be a standalone product any longer. Tourism has to be directly linked with the sustainable development activities of the region. Community development, sustainable development linked together, and tourism coming in as a supplementary source of support for the community. And it's high time that we marry humanitarian sector as well into this. It's only the synergy that is going to support each one of us. Humanitarian sector, it's a $27 billion industry or economy. But you look at the tourism, it's an $8 trillion economy. So there are so many resources that we can actually share. And that marriage has to happen for any of us to, survive similar crises in the future. It has to be the blueprint, is what I believe.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Very wisely spoken. And I think this is a very good summary in a way. But we know that there are a lot of discussions which we should have, and we should not have them all on our own, but we should have them at ITB. So I'm really looking forward also to have Indigenous tourism once again at ITB 2022. But in between, we should, the dialogue should go on, and we should do whatever we can to work for a better world, for better tourism, and for the rights of Indigenous people. So thank you so much for being with us, and I really enjoyed to see each one of you, and a lot of kisses going out to Canada, to the US, to Australia, and to India. So bye-bye and thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Rika.
you.